Greetings and welcome to Hexed Countered. I'm Joe. In this video, we're going to be looking at the setup and perhaps a little bit of gameplay of the game, the Kaisers High Seas Fleet, designed by Gilbert Collins. This is from Compass Games. And as you can probably guess, if you're unaware, this is a naval war game of the First World War, the Great War at Sea, 1914 to 1918. Okay, so as I said, we're going to kind of go through setting the game up so that you can see what's involved with that. And then depending on how long this is, we might do some gameplay. I have not made a final decision on that yet. So here you see the map. And obviously you can also see, hopefully, the sea zones. So each one has a name and these white lines that border it. So the way you win the game is controlling various sea zones during the turns, and by controlling them you gain victory points. There's a victory point track down here. It's this bottom one here. Right now it's on 0. You have a two-sided victory point counter. One side has the Entente, or the really more like the British symbol. This side has the German symbol. That would be the Central Powers. So basically you've got the Austrians, the Austro-Hungarians, and the Germans here, plus the Ottomans. That's the Central Powers. Then you have the Russians, the French, the Italians, and the British, as well as eventually the United States. And then you have all of these sea areas that are in play, from the Black Sea to the North Atlantic and everything else all around here. You've got the Baltic Sea. There are also minefields here, you can see, that are color-coded on which side has the mines, I think, if I remember correctly. So you have some down here by Gibraltar. You have some here at the entrance to the Baltic Sea. And then here in the Channel, you also have some. So that is kind of a brief overview. The game does provide us with a couple of charts, one for each side. We have an Entente and a Central Powers task force chart. Basically, you work largely in task forces. There are also some individual ships that can be out there, and there are submarines that have their own special rules as well. So the game is based on John Edwards' classic Victory at Sea. And yeah, so let me go and we'll get this setup going here. All right, so we did do a first look video, sorry, on this. And what we're going to be going through here is our setup and first turn. And then over here you can see our sequence of play, so we'll talk about that as we go through. But it's pretty straightforward. Each player will start or sorts his squadron counters by nationality and places them on his respective task force chart, along with the Room 40 chit for the EP, that is the Entente player. So let's start with the Entente. Okay, now here is our task force chart. So we're going to put our ships on here so that we have them available for placement. I'm just going to tuck this here in the corner to make it a little easier. We'll use the vastness of Russia to do that. It's not blocking any sea areas. We will start with the British here. So I didn't really sort these, so we'll do that real quickly, or I'll show you how to do it and then do it off camera. Obviously, these are ship counters, okay? And the large ships, generally speaking, the large ships are the ones that have these counters. You can see here in the corner, battleship, you have an attack and a defense rating. The defense rating essentially denotes how many hits you can take before you're sunk. So in this case, that would be 3, what we've got here. So you see 4th Squadron, 2nd Squadron. So here we have, and you can see the Temeraire, and its name is right here on the 4th Battle Squadron. So I'm going to just kind of tuck it there. And then we've got the Ajax, another battleship, which goes with the 2nd Squadron. And another 2nd Squadron, the Audacious, the Orion, Conqueror. All of these are second, it looks like. Second, 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 fourth, and fourth. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I will go through and do this off camera to save time, and then we'll come back and look at where everything is on here, and then we'll do the central powers, and we'll talk about what comes next. Okay, so all of the Royal Navy's out, and you can tell by looking at the stacks just how impressive the Royal Navy was. These are just capital ships, so and there are plenty of them. Now you also have these squadron markers. These are the ones you'll actually put on the map to denote where all of these, where all of these ships are located. So for now, I'm just going to stick them on the island itself, and we will come back to that. Now we'll move on and do the rest. Now the rest of these are pretty easy. All of the French ships, right? And they do have all of them, well, maybe not all of them, but most of them, if not all of them, all have pre-dreadnoughts, which have kind of a special function. They don't conduct combat. They can be used for area control if they're the only ones in that area. So you can use them, but they're outdated by the time the war begins. So they're all kind of, they don't do combat. They're basically, like I said, have limited use. So this is the French fleet. That's easy. You only have one. The Italians likewise, and they also have a pre-dreadnought. Here, the Russians have two fleets, one in the Baltic and one in the Black Sea. So you can see on their counter, you've got Black Sea, Black Sea, Black Sea. So the Black Sea's on this side, and then they also, of course, have pre-dreadnought. And then they have Baltic, 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 Baltic. So that. And then the USA is also on here. We'll just stick the American ships. They, I don't think have, they don't have a pre-dreadnought, if I remember correctly. Got the Delaware, the Wyoming, the Arkansas, Florida, New York, and the USS Texas. So we'll put those here. They, of course, are not in the war until we hit 1917. The seventh turn, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. Once we hit the second half of 1917, that's when the United States joins the war. Okay, so they're all set up. Now we do the same with the Central Powers. So they're a little bit less powerful, as you can kind of tell here, right? We've got the German Navy. They're pretty big. Well, for the Central Powers, they're big. They're the second biggest. Let's put it that way. Second largest in the game. Really not on par with the Royal Navy, but pretty powerful in general. Then you've got the Austro-Hungarians and the Turks here as well. Turkey only gets a ship if the Goeben becomes the Yavuz Sultan Selim if she moves to Constantinople on turn 1. So you have an option as the Central Power player to either keep the Goeben German or send it to Turkey, let it become Turkish, and then you can probably use it in play. And here is the counter for that one. So the Goeben is in here twice. You can see they're identical in terms of everything but the name and the flag, right? So we will make that decision, but the game begins with the Goeben being German. So if I slide my Entente task force up above the map, I know it's off shot now, but that's okay. We have limited real estate here for camera, and I think it's probably cool to show the whole map, and all the ships will be coming off the map anyway. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the Entente powers with the Central Power ships. I'll take a pause here, we'll come back, and then we'll talk about how turn 1 works. Okay, we have finished setting this up. Now I'm going to keep the task force charts off shot. Like I said, I want to have the map be the main thing because I can zoom in on this a little bit to to make the areas, once we get into having battles and so on, make that stuff a little bit more apparent. Now we'll get into the specific setups for turn 1, because you may have noticed that the only ones with actual task force counters that are on the map are the British, the Germans, and the Americans. And the Americans don't even enter the war for a while yet, so they're just going to be sitting up there in the old Western Hemisphere hanging out for now. But what about everybody else? Their ships technically will go on their home country, I think, because they're going to end up going back to ports and things in between turns. So like the French, they can return technically to any of the Entente's ports, whether it's French or British at the start, but also neutral, such as Portugal, can also support Entente ships only. And we'll get into the specifics of all that stuff here in a little bit, probably in episode 2, to be honest. I want to keep this one short and sweet, introduction, do the setup. I tend to babble. I apologize for that. All right. We do also have ships that show up later in different turns because obviously during the war, countries were still building vessels. And so they weren't available in 1914, but they may come in later on. The Germans, for example, if we look at, let's say, the 3rd Squadron here. So you have at start, you have the Friedrich der Große, Kaiserin, König Albert, Prinz Regent Luitpold. That's these guys right here. These are available at start as the 3rd Squadron. The 3rd Squadron will add these additional ships in turn 2. Okay, so they're not available at the start. They will be added in turn 2. Okay, and then the Austrians, they get one ship that appears, it's this guy right here, Zent Istvan, right here. That one appears in turn 4. The rest of these guys are available to start, including their pre-dreadnoughts, and including their lone U-boat. They do have a U-boat, the Austrians. And of course, the Turks won't get their ship and be out of the game entirely, essentially, if the Goeben, right here, does not go over there. All right, or Goeben. So that's that. Now, typically, for other countries that don't have squadrons, you leave their ships on the mat until they start the game, or until they enter the game. So the ships that enter in turn 1 are going to go on their countries, and I'm going to do that now. I just wanted to kind of separate that a little bit to explain how you set all this up. So in a moment, I'm going to pause, and we'll come back, and you'll see France and Italy will have their ships on map. The Austrians and so on, and the Russians. So as you can see, we are set up basically. Now you may notice that the Germans do have, in addition to their squadrons, they have a U-boat marker, and it says start on it, right? You can see that, start, which indicates it is an at start unit because the Germans have additional U-boats that come in on other turns. Now, speaking of that, here is the U-boat for turn 2. And you can see it says 2 there, right there. That indicates the turn of entry. And various ships, like the Russians here, they have this guy right here, the Alexander, that comes in on turn 6 in the Black Sea. Because the Russians actually begin this game with no units in the Black Sea. They get 2 on turn 3 and the Alexander on turn 6. They do have their ships up here in Baltic port, St. Petersburg. Then you've got the British have their 2 pre-dreadnoughts and their submarine on the map. French have their 2 squadrons. Essentially, they're individual ships, but they're ported together. The Corbeil and Paris are here. Then you've got two more, and the pre-dreadnought are down in Toulon. The Italians are here, right? There's their port. And you have the Austro-Hungarians here with the Goeben. There are 3 British battle cruisers in Malta. And that's it. We are ready to play. So, because I don't want this to go too long, we're going to wrap it up here. And I will come back very soon, day or two, and we'll start playing. And we'll see how long, how much we can get through. The turns can move pretty quickly. Of course, I do try to explain things, so that slows it down somewhat, but we can see how much of this game we can get through. And, depends on interest and so on as for how far I will go. But in general, looking forward to this. This does seem like a pretty cool and relatively lighter game. It's probably medium, which I think is what it says on the box in terms of complexity. The rules are not overly complicated. There are some edge cases and special cases and things, but in general, this is a fairly easy game to understand. And I'm looking forward to it. I did mention this in the comments for the November look ahead that, in terms of naval warfare, I do like naval games, and World War I is my favorite of those. Even though there weren't a lot of big battles, everybody talked about Jutland, of course, but there were other things that went on or could have gone on. You had the big dreadnought battleships. Air power had not really changed the game yet. You had the dawn of submarines, and this was, to me, this was a very interesting era of naval combat. It was kind of the pinnacle of the battleship, right? Because by World War II, although nobody knew it at the time, the battleship era was pretty much over, thanks to the arrival of naval aviation. All right, enough of that. Let's wrap this up. I do want to give a shout out to my members. Thank you for being members and supporting the channel. That is greatly appreciated. And I always want to make sure I remember to give you guys a collective shout out at the very least. And if you are interested in becoming a member, joining the ranks, so to speak, you can click the join button and find out about it. There is a shortish 4-minute or so video that talks about it. And, you can make your mind up. Regardless of that, just by watching, you are supporting the channel, and I do appreciate that. If you are a subscriber, that's extra helpful, and I do definitely appreciate all my subscribers as we close in on 5,000, which is a milestone I'm greatly looking forward to. So thank you to all my subscribers. Thank you to everyone who's watched. If you would consider liking, sharing, and or subscribing if you're not a subscriber already, that would be awesome. You could click the bell to get notifications when a new video appears. That happens about 3 or 4 times a week, generally speaking. But yeah, that's enough out of me. So comments, questions, post them in the comment section. Otherwise, I'm done, and we will be back soon with more from the Kaisers High Seas Fleet. But that's it. I'm Joe. This is Hexed Countered. And until next time, as always, happy gaming.